everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Anatomy of an Adaptation, formerly known as Best of Adaptation. This is a podcast that aims to compare and contrast classic novels with their cinematic adaptations. Today, as you can tell from the title though, we're going to do something different. One of my goals with this new season, with this new version of the podcast, was to not just be contained to the realm of books and films. There's so many other mediums that can be adapted visually, which is why today we're doing our first episode about a video game which was turned into a show. And I'm so very happy to have as guest my good friend from Fio Condutor, straight from Portugal, Rafael Félix. How are you doing, Rafa?
Very poor. Very poor. Will endure and survive. In a very topical way of putting it. I'm struggling with my health, as you can see. I'm pretty sure I'm not infected. It's just technically I am, but it's respiratory. It's not cordyceps.
It's not cordyceps.
Thankfully. But maybe John Hanna needs to have a look at me or something. But yeah, I'm very happy to be here to talk to you again, and especially about this game because it's maybe my favorite game of all time. It, like, yeah, if we can put together 1 and 2, it's pretty much my favorite games, both 1 and 2.
Wow, high praise, high praise. I'm so excited to do this with you because I know you're a big fan. So honestly, let's just jump right into our conversation because today we're talking about Naughty Dog's The Last of Us and the HBO adaptation.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone fucking except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
You're right. You're not my daughter. And I sure as hell ain't your dad.
I still remember when The Last of Us came out, or rather when it was announced back in around like 2011, 2012. I saw the trailer. I was very much into The Walking Dead, and I thought, ooh, this looks interesting. This looks along the same lines. But then sadly, the game came out on PS3 at the end of the era, 2013, by Naughty Dog, the same developers of Uncharted. I didn't have a PS3. And also, I didn't have a PS4, so it took a long time for me to actually play The Last of Us. While you, Rafael, actually did manage to play it, and as you said before, you're a big fan. So I'm curious to know, what is your history with The Last of Us? What are you excited about doing this episode? And just, the floor is yours.
So I actually wasn't able to play the game when it came out because I also didn't have a PS3 and I wasn't that aware that the game was out. I I asked my parents for a PS3 for quite a while. I never got it. I had a lot of games for PS2 and that was pretty much my thing for a couple of years. And then when I started a job like in 2016 or something like that, I managed to get the PS3 with The Last of Us in like an insane price or something like that.
Nice.
So yeah, the PS4 actually came out like a week before I bought the PS3. So I pretty much bought the PS3 to play The Last of Us back then. I wasn't sure that I would like it because I didn't know anything about the game. But yeah, it was a big surprise because yes, in PS2 there were a lot of narrative-driven games, of course, but it wasn't really my experience with it. Although I had a lot of games that I was a big fan. Maybe my favorite games of PS2 were like mostly narrative driven, though if you can put it like that for God of War, but that was kind of the thing I liked a lot. But I didn't experience a narrative quite like The Last of Us before I actually played the game. It was completely it mesmerized me pretty much. I cried a lot during it. I played a lot. It had a mean online mode as well that it was quite abandoned, and it's
Oh
been
yeah.
promised to be back for like the second game, but it's not out yet. But the survival game of The Last of Us was actually very very fun, and I was never an online gamer, but the narrative of it, the characters were so alive, and the story, it managed to still be a very fun game to play, and like if interesting mechanics, and like do something that I wasn't really aware. Of course, Uncharted was out already, but I haven't played Uncharted. Although I might have played it a bit, like borrowed it in like a friend's house or something,
Sure.
but I never played Uncharted like that. So The Last of Us, managing to put together narrative and a very fun game to play, was like a complete new to me, and kind of changed the way I looked at video games.
Nice. When about was this then? Was it like 2015, 2014?
2015, 2016,
2015,
something like that.
2016 you said, yeah.
I got there quite late as well. I played the PS3 to play almost the classics that I didn't play when the PS2 came out. So God of War 3 was one of the games that I
Yes.
played almost immediately after I bought the PS3. So yeah, but The Last of Us kind of stayed with me, and then I got a PS4, and I got the PS4 with The Last of Us remastered for it, with a Left Behind DLC, which was something that I hadn't played before. So I think I've played the game on all difficulties. Even Grounded took me way too long to finish it. But yeah, Grounded
That's off.
it's off. It's off. It's absolutely off. But yeah, it's an amazing game, and I love it to death.
Yeah, for people who don't know, if I'm not mistaken, the grounded mode is the one where you basically have only one life, and if you die, you have to restart the entire game from scratch. We're talking about a 14, 15-hour game if you are playing it on normal difficulty. So I can imagine on grounded it took you um, quite a long time.
Quite a month. I think it was
Jesus.
very frustrating. Yeah, and no listening mode. At one point, you just had to play it so many times that you knew all of the mechanics of the David sequence. I think I cried on that because I tried it so many times. So it's so hard, even in normal,
It's
doing it in grounded. Yeah, and it's almost like to the end and the end tail of the game. So absolutely dreadful. I don't know why I do that, because I just like to plat the games, and yeah, it kind of made my ass.
you needed a challenge. You were feeling the need for a challenge, right? Yeah, my experience with the game came very late. By very late, I mean that I actually played the game in 2023, right as the show was airing, because that's when it finally came out on PC. For people who don't know, for people who don't remember or are not into games, the game had a disastrous port on PC. It took literal hours just to compile the shaders. The actual game had horrendous pop-in textures constantly. There were some times where Joel just had basically a unibrow because the actual hair texture of the brows and everything was not loading properly. It was rough. Let's just say it was rough. I was not happy with my purchase,
Just
sadly.
buy a PlayStation.
I'm a PC gamer to my core. I've always been I think the last two consoles I ever had were a PS2 and a PSP, and I got the PS2 in like 2008, which was already almost obsolete by then.
Yeah,
So
it was an end cycle, I think.
it was super cheap. I will never forget just like booting up FIFA 2007 and being like, it's not gonna be get better than this. Like, this is real life. It looks like a
Yeah,
real game.
yeah. Those
Classics.
those were the years for FIFA. Yeah, yeah.
Those were the years. But it was an actual, you were playing FIFA for the soccer or football, whatever you prefer.
I was about
Not.
to punch you. You are European. You don't call it soccer.
I spent
Ah,
too much time. I have the American accent. I spent too much time with Americans. Thank you to my American listeners listening to this. But
but it's
still,
football, though. It
it
is
is
football.
football. It is
To the
football.
American friends, I think we are Europeans. We should. This is the heritage we need to protect, not any other stuff. This is the heritage we need to
This is the
protect.
important
This is
stuff.
the important stuff.
um, But speaking of The Last of Us, I was very excited to play it. I believe when it came out, I had already played the first season of the Walking Dead game, the one made by Telltale, which is essentially very similar because you have a convicted felon who escapes during the beginning of the apocalypse, and he finds this little girl by herself in a home, and they just try to travel to find their parents to Savannah, I think was the place. And so it's about zombies, survival. There's other survivors. There's backstabbings. There's cannibals. There's the whole shebang. You know, it's a post-apocalyptic tale with zombies. And so I always thought that The Last of Us would kind of be like that. But then it got all of these accolades. Everyone was loving it to bits. I always had the fascination of actually trying it and playing it for myself the first time because of just the messiness of the port, I could not fully get invested in the narrative. Even though I'd already seen the show, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and I knew the general plot points, something was not clicking for me. But thankfully, I replayed it now that the game has been fixed, now that I have a more powerful PC, and I managed to enjoy it quite a lot. Would I say that it's one of my favorite games? Probably not, but because it also feels like such a stepping stone for narrative video games that so many have taken from The Last of Us since then, and there's been this huge pivot towards having, you know, this slow paced, reflexive, meditative, over the shoulder stories about parenthood and you know looking after a kid. God of War, the 2000, the fourth one, the 2018 reboot, is also a strong example of that. Um, yeah, The Last of Us kind of kickstarted all of that in a way. This trying to prove that games could be more mature in a way that could actually rival Hollywood narratives. And for people who don't know, if you're stumbling upon this conversation and you really don't know what The Last of Us is about, to put it very briefly, there is essentially a zombie apocalypse, only that it happens not through people becoming undead, but through people being infected by a fungi, the cordyceps that we mentioned in the beginning of this conversation. And, you know, the entire world is going to shit. And there is this one lonely man, Joel, who is tasked to escort this young 14-year-old girl, Ellie, to a safe place where you know she could be studied because turns out she is immune to the cordyceps and maybe just maybe she might hold the cure to end this apocalypse and return to normality. So how do you feel about the characters of Joel and Ellie? You know, the game has this impeccable opening which sets up the darkness of Joel, the trauma, the drama of Joel as a character, which is right on the first day of the apocalypse, where he ends up losing his daughter because of a terrible, I don't even know how to say accident. You know, it's just the government trying to already kill people, destroy them, avoid, you know, taking precautions to the extreme. And yeah, he loses his daughter in this accident and he becomes this very very bitter man for the next 20, 25 years. So what are your thoughts on Joel as a character and then also his relationship with Ellie?
I think an important part of it is that the ground is laid very interestingly in the beginning because you don't start the game as Joel, you start the game as
Mm,
Sarah, which is the daughter. Uh, you start the game with a daughter and like the top of the room, top of the house, and then you creepily go around the house, which is quite poorly lit, with TVs going around, cell phones playing, sirens in the background, so you know something is not super right about it. And then just after you see the first person that is looks like it's infected, then Joel appears. So you establish Sarah in a way which is like a fragile little kid,
mhm,
but she's a true love with his father. He's a single father as well. Works a lot out of the house, so they have like a very weirdly grown up relationship, and you can get that with just a few scenes of conversation. The scene where where she gives her the birthday present, the watch, and all that is just tiny little modes. And then you have like the whole first chapter of it where you see the day one breakout, and you go with Joel, Sarah, and Tommy, the brother, through a town where everything is going AVOC. And I think you lay there the foundations for Joel, because you both see Sarah, the relationship, the relationship they have, and they kind of are everything to one another.
Hmm.
And the way she dies, and the voice acting in that scene is absolutely extraordinary. I've heard Troy Baker, the guy who did the voice of Joel for the game, and who also appears in the TV show, which
He
we'll be talking
does.
about, in a very interesting role actually. Um, but you lay there the loss of it. You hear the loss in his voice, in his cries. And yeah, you establish his character from the start. Ellie, it's an interesting thing because she's not. Again, she's a bit like Sarah. She's very grown uppy. She's a smartass, and she goes head to head with Joel, even though she's only like 14.
Hmm.
And she's alone. She's a loner. She's always been a loner. Uh, and you can sense they're both very lonely people together. And the show, I mean, it's nothing new or whatever, and it's something that has been said quite a lot, but it's really not about infected or anything like that. It's about the death relationship, though. Like Joel accepting his grief, and Ellie managing to be vulnerable as well to another like fatherly figure or a friend or whatever. So I think there's such beautiful characters, so well written, and they get developed very well through the chapters of the game, both
Hmm.
through gaming and through cutscenes. Because even the game mechanics of it, it tell a lot about their personality. So yeah, and honestly, both of those characters are absolutely amazing. But I think all of the side characters that come through the game actually have a lot in them, and are very, very interesting and much more interesting than most games would allow them to be.
Yeah, they don't never feel like archetypes, the side characters, in a way that is commendable, that they easily could have been, and they almost are. I think one thing that is important to that I want to mention is that it's always, just taken for granted in a way, considering how quickly our times are moving technology wise. um, Video games are still a very new medium. A very, very new medium. Like, if we want to be generous, we can say they started around the mid 80s, mid to late 80s, in the way that we intend them now with home consoles. So it's only been around 40 years, or actually 30 years, when The Last of Us came out. And I do know that there are some people who, even when the game came out, they were comparing them to Hollywood blockbusters. And they're like, but you've seen this in like Children of Men, you've seen this in the Dawn of the Dead, whatever, all these other stories, which I think is fair in one way, but also it goes to something that you just pointed out, because I agree with everything you said about the characters. But one thing that I really appreciated this time around is how much of their relationship is developed through game mechanics, compared to other games that always feel like they're starting and stopping between cutscenes and gameplay. This one, and it's just like a testament to Naughty Dog in general, and also Neil Druckmann, the creator of this game and the story of this game, at least, um, how they managed to smoothly transition between moment of gameplay, interaction, dialogue heavy walking sequence, and actual cutscenes, just like constantly going from one to the next, which makes the entire rapport between John and Ellie so special and so genuine. Especially, there's little things which can be kind of tiring in just a game mechanics perspective, type of thing. But the constant, picking up a ladder, moving the ladder to a spot, taking this little raft, Ellie jump on the raft because he can't swim, jump on this other thing, wait for her to do her thing. But the two of them, the two characters, start relying on one another more and more, and also you as the player start relying more on Ellie, because you're always playing as Joel for basically 95% of the game, or close. I mean, for most of the game, you're playing as Joel, um, which also leads into this. And of course, just to remind everyone, I forgot to say it in the beginning. Spoilers abound for everything. But there is a key moment in which Joel gets heavily injured, almost fatally so, and you actually end up playing as Ellie for an extended period of time. And in that moment, you not only pick up her movement abilities or lack thereof, because she is much tinier than Joel. She can crawl under smaller places, but also she's not as tall. She can jump as high as he can. She can pick up heavy objects. And it all just blends together so nicely. And not only the level of direction in the cutscenes, I think the way they frame everything, but you mentioned Troy Baker playing Joel. I have to say also Ashley Johnson as Ellie. She brings such a level of vulnerability to this character, but the type of vulnerability that is strong, that is, you said it before. Both of these characters have experienced loss. Both of them have closed themselves up from the world. They kind of need each other in order to survive in a literal sense, but also to survive on a human level, you know. And it leads to so many interactions that start to grow just warmer and warmer as the game progresses. This time around, I forced myself. I had a guide on the side, and I was like, I'm gonna get every optional conversation, which also included the barrage of jokes that Ellie reads because she has a book of jokes and gags that she keeps reading from throughout the game, which is very funny. Um, and I don't know, like I was fascinated by the way it is structured. There are moments where it feels a bit too long, I have to say, in terms of set pieces. Um, but overall, I was very happy with my replay of the game. I don't know if there is like a standout chapter for you that you are particularly enamored with, or a sequence. I also have to say, just like very quickly, this is very much an action game with a strong survival element in terms of stealth, but it does have that, there's running and there's jumping and there's the shooting and there's, at one point Joel gets stuck in a trap and he's turned around and he has to shoot the infected as Ellie is trying to save him. Like, it's always very adrenaline pump. There's always adrenaline pumping in this game. But I'm curious if there's any standout sequence in the game in terms of gameplay or maybe narrative that you were fond of.
I agree with you. There's some meaty spots in there that I think it could be a bit trimmed, like the whole building in the beginning of the game, like the skyscraper when they go up and down and all. It
Mm,
takes a while to get. Oh, okay, I do understand that to a degree, but then you get to the sewers and the trains. It's a bit long. I also think the Salt Lake City part it lowers the intensity a bit too much before you get to the hospital. Although I do understand they want you to get to the peak, and the
mhm,
hospital is definitely that. But I think Salt Lake is a bit slow as well. Um, but there are a lot of moments in this that I very much love, like the whole Bill City sequence. I love it to death. I love the banter between Ellie and Bill. It's very fun. It's very fun to watch. It's very interesting to see the interactions between Joel and his brother
mhm.
as well. They have like a very weird relationship, mostly due to loss as well. But that whole relationship is very interesting. And then I think the pivotal moment of the game, and it's both like the most traumatic one and the one where you get the connection between them, is when Ellie is burning James. Like the whole sequence where she has the cleaver and is incessantly just fucking up his head until Joel comes around and takes her. I think that is the pivotal moment of the game because there is the moment where you see them acting like father and daughter for the first time.
Hmm.
It's after they nursed it, that Hallie nursed him, and then she almost gets raped by a fucking creep, a cannibal creep as well. So that whole sequence is very good, also in the show, but we'll get there. But yeah, I think that is the pivotal moment of the game for me. It's the David assassination scene. James, sorry, I keep confusing them because the show is David and the game is James.
Yeah,
Though
it's like
James is in the show as well, which is Troy Baker. Okay, sorry.
there's some weird changes of like that are a
Which I
bit.
do understand, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there. We'll
Yeah,
get
yeah.
there.
What about you, mate? What are like the standouts moments of the game for you?
I definitely appreciated the opening much more this time around. It goes back to what you were saying as well. The atmosphere, the way it's constructed, it's very simple yet effective. You know, you're playing as Sarah, walking around this dark house, and you choose where to go. If you want to go straight to cutscene, Joel appears, move the story forward, let's play this game, you can do that. Or you can enter in the bathroom and there's a little piece of card that she knows, and she goes to the fridge and there's a note, and you know there's a TV turned on. She watches that TV and oh my god, there's someone at the hospital, and then there's an explosion. Then you actually witness the explosion delayed in the through the window. There's little details like that that just make it feel more special and more lived in, and they are present throughout the entire game pretty much. Always these opportunities to explore the world more if you are up to it, if you want. But also, I found the entire sequence where you do play as Ellie, which you just mentioned with James, um, it works so well because once again it goes back to that blend of narrative and gameplay. Ellie's by herself. She really does need help. She finds someone who helps her out fight the infected, and then this person who's supposedly a figure of good turns out to be a figure of bad. It's almost the anti-Joel. He's confident, he's cool, he has guns, he can survive this apocalypse. But yeah, at what cost? And you do feel fear in a way that, or rather, I felt fear, I felt tension in a way that I didn't feel when I was playing as Joel. Ellie does feel more, not fragile because it feels very pandering in a way to say fragile, but kind of. You know what I'm getting. You know what I'm saying.
Because
Um,
everything feels so bigger with her.
yes,
You are used to actually play with a lot of ammo and all, and then you have like a bow and arrow and
and a little
everything,
tiny knife.
and a little tiny knife. Everything can pretty much kill you. So yeah, I think the point is to make the contrast between how capable Joel is and how like rudimentary, let's put it like that, Ellie still is.
Yes, but also resourceful. But also resourceful. And yeah, that entire sequence is just brutal, tense, and it's intercut with Joel actually waking up after she has saved him and going to try and save her. But that's also something that I think it's worth noting is that, like you said, like Ellie ends up killing the man who has assaulted her or attacked her rather, and she has to get out of this scenario by herself, which is powerful in a way, narrative wise. She doesn't need, Joel to come save her at the last minute, which is what you're kind of hoping for. But it also means that she has been fully traumatized in a way that she really hadn't up until that point. And this element of violence and the cycle of violence and the way trauma makes people close themselves even more is prevalent through the entire game. It's literally the opening scene, as we mentioned, with Sarah's death. Joel's character, just Joel as a character rather, does not want to even mention or acknowledge that he had a daughter, that he lost her. He's unwilling to process the trauma because of that. He loses his partner in crime, Tess, after a couple of acts because she gets infected and she sacrifices herself, and he doesn't want to acknowledge that as well. He's just like, I have a plan, I have a mission, I'm just going to do that, focus on this, because acknowledging the emotions shows vulnerability, shows that you care, and this also makes you more scared. And he doesn't want to feel scared anymore, which is ironically what ends up happening in the end which I think we can save our conversation with the ending also when we talk about the show, um, which we can actually talk about now as well. I do remember when the game came out and everyone was talking about like it's this, oh, it's like a movie. It's almost like a movie. They should make it into a movie. Those were conversations they were having already around like 2014, 2015. Oh, looks like Sony is selling The Last of Us and Naughty Dog, they're working on a film adaptation. And it took years for it to actually go somewhere. And finally, HBO had Craig Mazin produce and write Chernobyl, which was a tremendous success, probably the most beloved miniseries of HBO's past 15, 20 years almost. And Neil Druckmann, the creator of The Last of Us, met with Craig Mazin, and he was like, you know what? I don't think we can do this story justice in a two and a half hour movie. I think this could actually work as a TV show. Hence, in 2023, beginning of the year, we got the first season of The Last of Us, which adapts the entirety of the first game in a nice, clean 9 episodes. What are your thoughts, Raphael, on the first time you watched the TV show and also revisiting it now for this podcast?
Uh, I think I like it more now, though I do
Oh,
see the faults a bit more as well now. I think I was so enamored by it as I was. I think we had a conversation back then. There was no way I would not love this. There was
yeah.
absolutely no way. And I think, of course, that taking it to the TV show is the proper way to do it. Even the game is very episodic. It goes through stations and cities, so it's little vignettes. So it does work very well serialized. They
Hmm.
even put the DLC in there, which we'll talk about. But I think they did the characters a lot of justice. All the changes they did, I think pretty much all of them were for the better. My problems are never the things that are different with the game. Because I think every change they did for the better. Because some things just don't translate, which fair enough, fantastic, and they found an alternative for that. Uh, but yeah, I do see the little bits where it starts flowing as well. I see that. I find the pacing issues here and there. I have a problem with 2 episodes. There are 2 episodes that I think do not work for me
Mm.
that much, but the rest of it, I'm just enamored with it. And even the episodes I don't like that much, they add to the characters, which, as the game, is the focus of the TV show, is those two characters. And one thing that really struck me this time is that they did a lot of justice to the side characters, even more than the game. The side characters in this are so good. Tess breaks my heart every single time. She's so good. Melanie Linsky is like the ultimate, like white scary lady. Amazing stuff in that. And David is creepy as fuck as well. So yeah, the major players, the major side characters in this that go around the game are so good, so good that they make the world feel much more alive, much more interesting, much more lived on. Um, and of course, both Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey are absolutely astonishing in this. Both of them. Both of them. A lot of people were questioning Bella Ramsey at a point, and I do know why. And fuck them all. I know why they were complaining about Bella Ramsey, and I think they all should get fucked.
No, they're
Uh,
still complaining. They're
yeah,
still complaining.
let's wait for season 2. That will be very interesting. We'll talk about that. But yeah, and also what they did with the actors of the game. So they found a way to put in Troy Baker, Ashley Johnson, the guy who plays Tommy that I don't remember the name. Marlene, I think it's the same actress who
Same
plays Marlene.
actress, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure it is. I think there are a couple more in there as well.
Oh, there's is it Laura Bailey? She has a cameo as one of the doctors in the end in the hospital.
Yeah, that whole hospital scene had a completely different meaning now because I've played the second one.
Oh,
Uh,
we'll get to it. We'll get
yeah,
to it
yeah, we'll
because
get to
I
that.
have ideas about the entire
Yeah,
ending. Not
yeah. I have problem with 2 episodes, and that is one of them.
okay. Well, speaking for myself, I was very hyped for this, especially because even though I know there was some pushback from the fans of the game, not so only with the casting, which, like you said, fuck them, very simply. People are just complaining about looks, which I think is something very funny. I watched the entire like behind the scenes featurettes they made for
They
this
wanted to
show.
sexualize a 14-year-old.
Yeah,
Jesus,
and
why are gamers so weird?
I don't remember if it was. I think it was Ashley Johnson in one of the interviews where she said, like, Ellie doesn't exist. Not like in the literal sense, but also just like you're never going to get someone who has my performance and voice in this digitally created body. No one is. You can find someone who looks like that, but who can't pull it off, or vice versa. And I think the casting. Just to start off with the casting, I was very happy with it. I don't I think I'm just kind of burnt out on Pedro Pascal now, playing very serious stoic characters. I wish he played more. I don't know, like lighter roles,
He did
lighter
like
characters.
that Dick Cage movie, which he
Yes,
was
that's the
very
one.
goofy.
I love him when he's goofy. Even when he played Oberyn Martell in Game of Thrones, he had a strong energy to him. And now they're always typecasting him in things like this in Gladiator 2, where he's like, I'm very serious. It is straight face throughout. Serious man. Which I get. He pulls it off very nicely. Um, but no, I think though it was very inspired casting because that's kind of the character. There's not much you can do about that. That's Joel in a nutshell. And like you said, everything about the side characters, I will get more in depth into some of them later. Um, but watching it the first time, I did really like the show. I think I almost loved it, but there was something that wasn't fully making me invested in it. And rewatching it now, I do think this is just very flawed in its structure. It's 9 episodes long. I want to say that for the first four, almost 5 episodes, I don't really feel like the creators of the show really care that much about Joel and Ellie, in the sense that there is very little development, character development between the two of them in those moments because they're so busy setting up the world and setting up the people around them in a way that detracts from the main focus. And it's something that I think I intuitively felt the first time around, but especially after having just replayed the game. I went straight from finishing the game to watching the show. I was thinking like, damn, you do I mean, it's not an easy job. I don't envy them for doing it, and I think they did maybe the best it could have been, maybe, all things considered. But I do really miss that almost first person perspective from the game. In the game, you're always following Joel, in of course because you're playing as him. But I think exploring the world and seeing it almost exclusively through his eyes and then Ellie's is way more interesting than the way that they do it here, where they spend the opening scene of both the first episode and the second episode explaining the cordyceps and explaining the pandemic and how it happened. Which, okay, fine. What does it add? Nothing. It's just like world building and making people scared post COVID or during COVID, rather. Um, but again, it worked. In a way, it worked. Um, then you get the first episode where you're following Sarah, which is the best way they could have gone about it because you're playing the game, and if you don't know anything about The Last of Us for the first time, you might actually think that she's going to be the Ellie. Like, oh yeah, little girl on the cover, it's probably her, in a few years, who knows. But then twist, she dies. So you need to have her be the protagonist for the majority of the first episode. But even then, just the transition between that and the apocalypse just didn't really feel smooth. But something I found so consistent in this rewatch is that up until we get to the fifth episode, which is when we introduce Henry and Sam, and we get that entire part, and then we just have Ellie and Joel for the rest of the show. I think like it's very uneven in a way that it's keeping me from fully investing into these two characters. And on the flip side, it's making me way too invested in side characters who are not going to last the episode. I don't know how you feel about this, but that is something that I felt so hard this time around. It's especially with episode 3, which already when it came out, it's the long time episode, it's the Bill and Frank episode. When it came out, everyone watched it, everyone loved it, and people were saying, "Oh, you can actually watch this without seeing the rest of the show. It's that good." And it does indeed work as a standalone episode, but I think in a way that kind of backfires on the entirety of the show as a whole, because it's essentially the Up effect, and by that I mean the Disney Pixar film Up, where you have the first 10 minutes, which are look at this lovely little relationship, look at how it develops, look at how it tragically ends. Easy tearjerker. It works, it's effective, but then everything that happens after is just lacking that emotional punch. And rewatching this, especially after having played the game, I get what they were doing, but it also embodies this need. And then I'm gonna let you speak because I'm just talking so much right now. I'm throwing so many different ideas. I'm sorry, but I do think that they tone down a level, not the entirety of it, but a level of brutality from the game to make it more appealing to people. And I think it kind of lost a level of edge that was present. And I think the Bill and Frank episode is emblematic of that because you have this lovely little gay story in the show, well in the game, it's barely alluded to it being a romantic relationship between Bill and Frank. Also, you don't see Frank. Frank is dead. You find him at the end of the chapter. Bill is alive. Bill is bitter. And as you mentioned, you spend this entire chapter following him around and this bickering with Ellie, which is completely absent from the game. So how do you feel about these episodes, to be honest, just to start it off? And then if you have, I'm curious to know how you feel about those ideas.
I have a different experience than you for a very simple thing. I'm already invested in this relationship even before the show starts.
Mm,
So I don't need that work for me. I lived in this relationship for a couple of years now. So everything I get is an add-on, and the things I have with Ellie and Joel are completely fine to me. I think that episode 3 works very well because it's like the only hopeful episode. It's
hmm,
like it's because the show is very depressing, as the game is, of course. But that's that whole thing and that whole like letter of Bill in the end to Joel says we are here to protect something. Actually, I think it it gives the journey a different connection because
hmm,
you haven't seen a complete connection in this show for this because with Tess and Joel it was very cold. Uh, yeah, you had Sarah and Joel, but they barely spent time together. But that moment where you like between commas of course, but you waste a bit of time in that house seeing that beauty is still possible, that love is still possible, even in a very weird survivalistic kind of selfish way. It's a beautiful thing, and I think it gives a different weight to the rest of the journey. I think that the episodes are very uneven, as you said, like the length of them. It's very weird.
oh
Sometimes
yeah.
you do feel like, yeah, you should finish the episode now, do another. Like the whole first chapter of the game should be the first episode. You should not have both Sarah in that episode and Ellie in the end of the episode. I don't think that works very well. Uh, and there's a couple more things like that where you think, yeah, you're just putting this little bit for the next episode, and I don't think you need. You need to put it back, and if you need to put more episodes, just do it, or you make them shorter, which I think it's good because some episodes are like an hour 20, and I absolutely don't fucking need to be. That is 100% sure.
And some are 45. Just
It's
like, why?
we and what annoys me about that, so about the length time, is that then the final episode, where you should actually waste some time, is super short, and it solves everything very quickly, and I hate it. I don't like the last episode because of that. It rushes through everything of it.
It's, yeah, the final episode is 45 minutes in length.
Yeah, exactly
The
45.
first 11, because I think it was like 10 or 11, because I checked, the first 10 or 11 minutes are the birth of Ellie.
Yeah, which
And
is a
then you
beautiful,
have,
which is a beautiful scene and a beautiful way to homage Ashley Johnson.
I
That
think
should
that's
be said.
the only good, I mean, no, it's not the only, it's like a well-made, I'm feeling so, I feel so frustrating this entire show, because the main thing that makes it frustrating for me rewatching it is that, also because I remember, like, I was listening to the podcast when it was coming out, like those HBO, like, after the episode, diving in, where you have Troy Baker as the host and he's talking with Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann. I listened to all of that when the show was coming out, and then I watched all of the behind the scenes featurettes, which is like 2.5 hours of a lot of nonsense, generic things. But I totally get why they make certain choices, and like this idea, especially I do like the idea of honoring Ashley Johnson and giving her that spotlight. Also, connecting the original Ellie with the show Ellie. It's a nice little scene. You also have the connection to Marlene. I don't feel like it adds much of anything. In a way, just the idea of like, oh, okay, so Marlene knew the mother, and so she can mention it once during the climax, and that's it. Okay, like it's
I
little
think that
choices
is the
like
scene for the audience. That is
it's
like
for
they need
sure.
to know. So yeah, we. But I mean, if they have to do it like that, sure. But I would take it or leave it. Though I would maybe let it be because I do like the symbology of it with Ashley Johnson.
I
But yeah,
think
it
it's as
doesn't
much for
add
the
up that
audience as
much.
it is for the fans of the
Yeah, fair
game.
enough. Yeah, fair enough.
It,
Which
I,
actually, let me just add this
of
to
course,
this because I think the references to like some Easter eggs of the game are very like sprinkled out very beautifully.
mm,
So I don't think anything is very much on your face, and it's not like I haven't played the game, so I don't understand this. There are just a few elements of it that pop up here and there, and they are very cute and very fun. And as the game, as we talked about before, like the relationship of them is actually the game. There are trophies you get for optional conversations, so you get those here as well, like some beautiful like interplay between them and all. It's very fun, those Easter eggs, like very little ones.
yeah, no, it is very nicely handled. I appreciated those bits. There are some differences in the lore, which I get in a way. You mentioned in the beginning of this conversation that this is not about the zombies. This is not about the plague infected. This is a story about love, and I really like how almost every episode is structured to portray different types of love: the brotherly love, sacrificial love, romantic love, just how everything intersects and the lengths that people go to protect, to shelter that love. I'm a softie, I'm a romantic, I love those things, I love love, Nick loves love. But there are some also choices that they make with the infected where it does indeed feel like they didn't care about the infected that much, to the point that they leave them almost completely to the wayside except for like a couple set pieces, and that's it. Their reasoning was the game is an action game. You need to have action sequences where you fight the zombies, where you fight the raiders. We can't have a show like that, which fair enough. But then they make the changes like, oh, they have a hive mind. Okay, what does that do? Nothing. Nice. Okay, okay, interesting. Get it. Um, they have those, like we mentioned, the Bill and Frank.
That is kind of alluded in the game as well.
Yeah, yeah, I guess. I think they mentioned something about it being that in the game you have this literal manifestation of the spores that can infect you, and they were like, you can't just, I mean, in real life, you can see the spores that clearly. You can't be like, no, 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 they're just in this room. They're not coming out through the door; they're staying in. So they made it more plausible this way. But yeah, tiny differences like that. I do like that the characters of Joel and Ellie, or maybe it's just the performances, the writing. I don't know. There is this moment where in episode 5, it just comes together in a way that it really didn't for me in the previous episodes. I don't know if it's the way they have directed the actors, maybe. Um, there is this disconnect between the two performances in a way that doesn't feel like, oh, it's meant to be like that, but it is almost like they are not too sure how to play the characters. That's something that I find interesting sometimes watching pilots of TV shows or unaired pilots, especially, where you can see the protagonist didn't really know which voice to give to a character, which quirks to play into going on. And then you get to the second episode, it's like Twin Peaks is a great example of that. You watch it at first, and Agent Cooper is a bit, you get to the second episode, and this is the one that everyone knows and loves, and continues to be that for the rest of the show. With this one, I don't know, like Ellie is made to be almost like an angsty teenager in the first couple of episodes, and then she becomes just the Ellie that we know from the game, which felt a bit weird. Um, Joel, from for the majority of it, like doesn't do much, which again is the character just being very stoic, very strong. Um, I don't know if it's maybe the absence of control of the character that makes it feel different. Probably is also that, but I don't know. I always felt this distance for the first few episodes until we get to the Henry and Sam, which I think for me on a rewatch was the maybe the highlight of it, because they add this little change of, these are the two brothers in, I think it's like Philadelphia, they've changed it in the show, or Kansas City, maybe
It's Kansas City. Yeah.
Kansas City in the show, right? And the way they've changed, you have Sam, who is deaf, and
Henry.
mute. Yeah, sorry.
Henry.
The
Henry
mute.
is the big one. Sam is the little one.
And Sam is the little one. And I love their relationship and their dynamic. And that's also like an element of representation that we don't get as much anymore nowadays, or ever, to be honest. Which was appreciated to see some ASL, yeah, no, ALS. They keep mixing the two. And it leads to a very tragic episode. It's actually well paced, well structured. I don't know how you felt about these two characters in particular. They were definitely a highlight, emotional highlight for me on a rewatch.
Yeah, it might be my favorite episode as well.
Nice.
Next to the David episode, like the
Hmm.
cannibal cult stuff. That I love that episode because it's once again is when the connections actually work. They held you to this world, and when you see that relationship between Henry and Sam and Joel, like finally trusting someone dearly, like not just element, just like opening up to someone, and then that someone being taken away from you absolutely immediately. It gives like a contrast to the Bill and Frank episode, which is slightly hopeful. And
Hmm.
this one reminds you, yeah, it's still a very fucked up world. So I love that character. I like the way they introduced like the character of Melanie Linsky. I think she works quite okay. Scary white lady with like a very high pitched voice, like it's sadly scary actually. Um, I think we didn't need that much background as we got on her. On Emery was fine. On Melanie Linsky's Kathleen, I think it was a bit much.
Yeah, we spent a lot of
Uh,
time with her,
yeah,
even
with
in the
her,
previous episode.
yeah, I think it's slightly a bit much. But overall, once again, the relationships always win with me. That's the thing with me with this stuff,
We're
which is
softies.
which is not something that works on episode 7,
Which is
the
the
DLC
LC. Oh, you're
to the
not a
left.
fan of
I'm
it.
not a fan of Left Behind.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's a way too long of an episode. It breaks the rhythm of the show pretty much. Very. That's why it's a DLC. It doesn't work in there. It doesn't help the pace of it, and you don't need it. You don't need,
Can I?
if you wanted, just put it like you did with like the vignettes or the opening of the last episode or John Hannah ones or whatever. You can make those work. Do it here. Don't do a like an hour episode. It's insane. It doesn't need it. It doesn't need it.
I'm gonna say something actually controversial now. I really liked it. I like the way they implemented it narratively. I was shocked by that, honestly, um, because it feels like it's such an important part of Ellie's character, her story. In the main game, she just alludes to it during the final monologue or final dialogue that she has. But then, yeah, for people who don't know, like DLC is a downloadable content. It's released after the game has come out, and I think this came out like 6 months, 6 7 months after The Last of Us came out, and it's entirely a flashback. So basically, you have this sequence in the game and in the show as well, where Ellie is kind of like trying to save Joel. In the game, it's 4 chapters, and it keeps alternating between older Ellie trying to find resources for Joel and younger Ellie with her friend Riley, kind of like going into this abandoned mall, just having fun, just being teenagers, and also a little bit of a romantic interest, a little bit of that LGBTQ plus representation, which was shocking at the time, unexpected because it's also not present at all in the game itself, which then connects to a bigger relationship that she has in part 2. We'll talk about that later. But my only problem, kind of, if I can call it a problem, I'm just not a fan of Storm Reed as an actor, which I'm sad about it.
She's very bland. She
She
doesn't
is
help.
she's very bland. She's very bland. You have Storm Reed acting against Bella Ramsey, and they are on 2 different levels throughout this episode. Her delivery is so
Bleh,
just yeah,
bleh.
just monotonous, flat, which is a shame because I do think narratively still kind of works. It's a very nice episode, and probably from one of the better instances where they interweave the game's narrative with the shows, kind of like finding those similarities in a way that works. But then this leads to also our other favorite episode, which is the one with David, which in the game is James. Little cameo from Troy Baker, or the good Joel
Not
himself.
the cameo. He has a character.
I mean, he probably has like the biggest character together with Ashley Johnson, which feels fair to give the two of
Yeah.
them the juiciest roles in
I think they
the
even gave him the
adaptation.
name of James, so people would like be more attentive to them, like
Hmm.
the people who play the game, because James is the David in the game. So I think they switched the names so people that play the game actually focus a bit on Troy Baker.
Like keeping them on their toes that way. Again, like in terms of choices, they make this thing where they turn, let's say, just keep the name also like David. They make him this pastor-like character of a community that turns out to be cannibals. I don't know if we needed that extra religious angle to the entire thing, which also turns out to be his belief in just like cordyceps are God in a way. Kind of a flawed, flawed philosophy
No,
that he
I think
has.
it just makes a connection between the thing that he was a teacher before, and
Oh, yeah.
he said, "Oh, I had a violent nature." Yeah, he was a fucking pedophile. And then the natural transition is go from a professor to preach. It's a natural
That's how you get
transition
the
for a
kids.
pedophile. Exactly, it's a natural transition for pedophiles.
Very natural, very smooth. But I think it is a properly terrifying character because it feels so real. It's a level of danger that does fall into real life dangers. You are not going to find cordyceps or zombies around, but there are people who abuse their power and manage to coerce others into relationships like that, which is it's handled very much with care. And I think that's also the moment where I truly did fall in love with Bella Ramsey. I think when she just left on her own like that, she proves her worth. And again, I don't know if it is one of those things where they just maybe didn't have enough time prepping, because that's something I noticed compared to other shows and other projects. There's not much behind the scenes from pre-production, and I think it's probably because of COVID. So I can totally see them just going straight into production, and the actors just had to kind of figure it out on the spot. And I'm going to say something that's maybe also controversial. Um, I don't like, for the most part at least, I don't like when they try to replicate scenes from the game, because I actually found the scenes from the game to be better directed. And the biggest example of that is probably the scene from the game, which is the conversation that Joel and Ellie have in the abandoned house after the Tommy dam, you know, which is the part where Ellie finally realizes and discovers that Joel had Sarah, that he lost her. He's just like, oh, you're treading thin ice right now. Just don't say another word. Careful what you say. I'm not your daddy, you're not my daughter, I'm not your daddy. It's a powerful, powerful scene. You're watching it in the game, and outside of just facial animations with, technology changes, whatever, but the way the two characters move through the space, the way they weave their hands and arms around, um, it felt so impassioned. In the show, it felt stilted. Especially Pedro Pascal is in NPC mode, funnily enough, just kind of like standing still. I'm just going to say my line standing completely still, which maybe is meant to be played as,
I think it was disarming that
defense,
moment. I think it wasn't expecting to hear that. I think,
I
and I
guess, or
I
defensive
actually
maybe. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go, go.
I think that scene works very well for me because you've
In
been
the show,
waiting.
you mean?
Yeah, in the show, yeah,
Mm.
because I think you've been waiting for some kind of like slam on the table, like we need to talk about something, and when it comes, I think it's very cathartic. I think it works better in the game. That's fair, but I think it does work as well in a TV
Mm.
show. I think the place where it is also very very well made because it's the moment where Joel is thinking of leaving uh Ellie, and when he decides to go, they actually have a relationship at that point. They even share like a rifle thing and all that. So I
Yeah,
think it pretty senses that scene and it works very well.
it's a nice montage that they have, and I also appreciate that they don't have in the game, because of like technical limitations and narrative choices. You don't have Jackson Hole as a place yet. You're going to see that in the part 2 game, but then in this season they scrap that entire chapter and actually move it to Jackson Hall. So you already see this vibrant community, which is probably the second time we have proper hope in the entire show. It's like things can actually go to normal, because of communism. Can be good if done properly. Some nice
Oh yeah,
representation.
it is a commune.
We're not
Beautiful moment.
communists. It's not like that.
Beautiful moment.
It's we're literally communists. It's just like it's fun. I think the humor, both in the game but especially in the show, it's very understated, but it's welcome. Whenever it happens, it's welcome. It's needed. You do need a little bit of release like that.
And
But
let me just say that
yeah, of
also
course.
Bella Ramsey has a very childish laugh, so it works
Mm,
very well when she almost like growls, and she gets very happy. It's very nice. And also, there's like the moment where Henry kills himself, where she doesn't scream anything, or she just growls. It's very visceral, that moment where she
mm.
actually just it's very traumatic. It's not a scream; it's a growl. I think those little moments from Bella Ramsey are amazing. I mean, I think she's amazing in this.
Yeah. Also missed opportunity in that episode to not just end with the cut to black, which is kind of what happens in the game.
This is exactly what happens in the game. Yeah, you hear the shot, and yeah, cuts to the next city.
Yeah, it's just so weird in this. Yeah, in the game, the way in the show, the way they do it is focus on her face, which I think it's great, and then instead of like cutting to black end of the episode, they have the extra scene where they prepare the graves. It's like that could have been the opening of the next episode. Also, because the following episode starts with Henry shooting himself again. which was also a weird choice. And I think you could have just add the graves being prepared in the next episode. Little editorial choices. I get why they made it like that. Um, but it's, I don't know, like they always manage whatever they could have, except for the Bill and Frank episode, whatever they could have like that extra punch to really leave you speechless. They managed to add that little like extra scene or extra beat. That's like,
No
ah,
episode ends where it should. That's a very valid criticism.
basically. I think the only episode where it ends at a good point, but then again, it's one of the shorter episodes, and then it's dragged out. It's the first time we see Amy and Sam in episode 4. It's like that's a good ending. It's like, oh, who are they? I don't know. They're in
And the
danger.
last
Wait 1
episode, of
week.
course. The last episode, of course.
And
Because
the
it's the
last
ending of the
episode.
game.
Speaking of, we mentioned Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole is a primary location in The Last of Us Part 2. Now, I haven't played most of Last of Us. I did try some when I was at your home. Very generously, you offered me your PS4, and I managed to play some of The Last of Us Part 2, sorry. But I feel like so many of the choices and changes that they made for the show compared to the game come from the knowledge of what happens in Part 2. Because when they made The Last of Us in 2013, they didn't have ideas for the second game. Or if they had, they didn't like focus on them in any specific way. And with the show, rewatching it now especially, there is so much, I don't know if it's foreshadowing, signposting, I don't know which term we want to use, but uh, it is abundantly clear where they want to go with the narrative. Now, because the show hasn't come out yet, The Last of Us Part 2, Season 2 hasn't come out yet, in case people don't know what happens in it, we're not going to spoil it. We're not going to spoil it. Um, but there is such a strong emphasis, constant emphasis on the cycle of violence, the importance of each human life, and how everyone is related to someone else. Because you have like the Henry and Sam story is turned into that because you have the Melaninsky, they killed the kid, and also the kid that Joel kills when they arrive in Kansas City is like someone's brother, and they're like, he also killed that guy, the little kid, 16-year-old. You have I think it's like the community of David. In the previous episode when Joel gets stabbed to death, one of the kids that killed him, they're like, "Oh, we need revenge for him because they killed him." Just it's going in the direction of where The Last of Us Part 2 goes. I don't know how you feel about that. I'm curious because especially you love the game Last of Us 2. I can't really comment on the story outside of I know what happens, but I can't comment on like the experience of playing it and witnessing it. So I'm curious how you feel about this conscious decision from the creators to have these elements.
Um, yeah, so The Last of Us Part 2, it was an endurance test that I did. Because I
Oh.
managed to not. I didn't play Part 2 for like 4 years. I think because I didn't have a PS4. Uh, so I always managed to be away from spoilers, so I didn't know anything about it before I played it, which was
Wow.
something that many people didn't have the luxury because there were leaks even before the game went out for like the pivot moment of the game. But I will say one thing about The Last of Us Part 2. Like Part 1 is an amazing like narrative game, and the game once again does character through game, and it does the exact same thing that Last of Us Part 1 does, but like enhanced in pretty much every way imaginable. It's a much longer game, and it has like two of the most amazing, brave things I think anyone could put in a narrative. Honestly, the things they do both in the beginning and in the middle of the second game, it's mind blowing, and I think it will. Yes, you mentioned cycles of violence, and pretty much the second part of the game. It's that. It's the cycles of violence. Every life matters. Everyone is connected to someone else, and revenge does have a toll in the second game. And I think, honestly, playing through the second one multiple times as well, it made me appreciate the first one even more
Hmm.
because I think it lays the ground very well, but it has a very particular like way of looking at the world in the first one, which it's still a bit hopeful. The first game, you are managing for a cure, you're trying to get to some place. In this game, in the second game, it's not that. It's definitely not that. And you mentioned when we were talking about the first TV show, we said that yeah, it's not as violent and as brutal. I think the second season will be because the second game is much more visceral and much more violent. So I think it will compensate a little bit. I think it will be again as a thing of contrasts, where
Hmm.
the first one's a bit mild, and yeah, and if there's one thing I'm really hoping for this second season is that first they stick with the structure of the game because I think the structure of the
Oh.
game, and they already said they're doing 2 seasons for this game, so season 2 and season 3. It will be the second game. It will be 2 seasons. There is a split point in the game, and I'm hoping, praying that they stick to that way of doing it. I'm not sure they will. I think it will take a lot of bravery to do that. I see the trailer and I don't think they will do it because there's stuff in there that shouldn't be there in the trailer, though they can be misleading us a bit. I think, I think that's also a possibility.
Hmm.
But if they stuck with the structure of the second game, I think they would have an amazing thing. Like both in the ending of season 2, if they stuck with the structure, and in the first bits of the second season, because there's a pivotal moment there, and it pretty much made everyone like going through walls. And I'm just here waiting for everyone of the mortal world that didn't play the game and doesn't know anything to actually feel the same things that I did during the first hours of The Last of Us Part 2.
I could bet this is the extent of like spoilers I will say for like the second game. I could bet good money right now. The opening scene of the first episode is going to be introducing Abby in the hospital. That's all I'll say. I could bet good money that's going to be the opening of the second season.
I
Um,
surely hope not, because everything works so much better. Because we are just there in Mia's res with her in the beginning of you are confused for the first like 5 hours of the game, and it's amazing. It's amazing confusion when you get to the point where the game is taking you. It's amazing,
yeah,
and I hope they trust us. And I think Neil Druckmann, even if he is the piece of shit he is, I think I do think he has an eye for what fans and people want to watch, and I think he might
maybe.
stuck with the structure, and because I think also the structure works because 100% it will keep people for season 3. 100% it will keep people for season 3.
Maybe. Um, I, I, I do think in this moment, and we can start going towards the closing of this conversation as well. Sorry, I do think that there is at this moment just in these moments it becomes clearer to me the difference between the two mediums. We usually talk about the books and the films, and there's decades of people, an entire century of people talking about these differences. But for the most part, movies and shows have not been that successful in adapting video games because they are inherently an active medium. Movies and shows are actively passive. You sit down, press play, you don't do anything else except watch, experience the thing. With the games, you are partaking in it, you're moving your fingers, taking part in it. And there are some moments in the game of The Last of Us Part 1 where just experiencing it yourself works so much better. Not only just in terms of the visceral nature of it, because it is a brutal game. It's gnarly. If you put down one of those pipe bomb thingies, traps that explode, like limbs go all over. It's nasty. You shoot someone in the head and they fall near the puddle of blood of water, and there's just like blood coming out and blending into the water. There's a disturbing attention to detail in this game, and it's surprising that an HBO show, which are usually more graphic than others, is this mild. I do wonder where the second season will go, but I do think that you mentioned that you found the last episode to be the weakest. Even rewatching it, the entire climax in the hospital, where Joel is going floor to floor just looking for Ellie, I think it's a moment that's just, to put it, just doesn't work. Just it's not earned. If you're playing the video game, you have slaughtered possibly thousands of people throughout, at least hundreds. Of course, you want to have the show be more grounded. You cannot afford to have Joel kill, like 20 men per episode. Fair enough, makes sense. But by toning down the violence throughout the show and then having this climax where he just kills an entire hospital of armed people, it's so weirdly directed, it's so weirdly paced. It's a montage that just doesn't feel disturbing, doesn't feel. I don't know how you felt about that. I think that was my main problem with it. It's not so much just the length of the episode, which I do agree is way too. It feels weird to have a season finale where you basically have 30 minutes for the actual
It felt Game of
final hour.
Thrones, honestly. It felt like when I saw the length of the last episode, I thought, oh, there's way too much story for this amount of runtime. It smells fishy. It was
Mhm.
bad. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. They toned down the violence to play it through. I think even if they did the montage, I think there were a few technical things that would up it up a bit. Just like take off the music,
Oh
play
yeah,
silent, and just put the gunshots, or not put anything, or not slow motion or anything, just dry, absolute violence, graphic violence on it. No things on it, no slow motion, no music, just even silent. I think would work. So I think that montage would work with some tweaks, but overall, just so rushed and not turned at all.
yeah, and even there's this moment that I really love in the show. They're constantly making it, reminding you, Sarah died, and the symbolism. Ellie's like Sarah. They even show her in the first episode. Again, it's like, okay, we get it, we get it. We know this happened. We watched the show. We know where the story's going. Um, in the game, I do love the moment where Joel saves Ellie from the surgery, and the hospital has, a lot of other soldiers and people from the Fireflies that are rushing in
It's a
to
fucking army
actually.
there.
There's an army there because of course there is. It's a hospital. It's one of the main HQs. He hasn't killed all of them. He's only killed like 20 people, whatever, and he has to run away with her. And it is recapturing the initial chase through the city from the first chapter with Sarah. And I was like, this is good mirroring. This is done well. You feel the pressure and the tension. You don't know what's going to happen. In the show, they don't do it. I think they could have been such a cool scene to have in the show, to actually have, okay, maybe you toned down the violence before, but then you actually show them escaping and running away. Then they don't, which fair enough. But then they do replicate essentially one to one the final moments. Iconic, I would even say.
Yeah, even if they mirror, I think they spoiled it with the rest of the episode. I don't think it has the gravitas that has the in the game. The game is very dry. That this, it's like what the fuck is this the end? The credits roll, and then you have to wait like what was it, 6 7 years or something for
7 years,
Last of
7
Us
years,
Part
yeah.
Two. Uh, so yeah, I think the final episode is just a dud.
Yeah.
Totally dud. And I think maybe the second season will hurt because this final episode is very important for the second season. And I think the way they took, even maybe they do like a different perspective, maybe not showing Abby, but doing another perspective from that point of view, like putting yourself in like in the doctors or in the soldiers, and Joel just comes in there like fucking John Wick and pretty much murdering everyone. Maybe you can do that and it works. But as of now, if they stuck with just the opening. I don't think it will work super well. Now I'm trying to remember how the second game. Oh yeah, I know now. The second game opens in a different way, so I think that if they go like that, it will be pretty much okay. But I maybe the final episode will hurt a little bit the beginning of the season two.
Yeah, it's lacking that extra punch as well of the Gustavo Santolalla, Santaya. I
What a
don't
genius!
just
What a
the
genius!
composer of The Last of Us, the game. They also had him for the show, and I think he's the unsung hero of this franchise because his music it's so minimal, so understated, and it's beautiful.
Immediately recognizable as well. To like a
Yeah.
few touches of guitar, and you know it. You're there, and you know everything you need. I think if in the second game they teased with the strings of it, where people lost their shit in like E3 back then, when they played
Mm,
like some guitar things because people know it. Such a simple thing, and it becomes like a big symbol in season two as well. So the music will be even more important stuff in the second season. And Gustavo is just this amazing stuff with the guitar.
yeah, and that final track for me, like the hard cut credits and the music starts playing. That track, I don't know the name of it, but it's one of my favorites from the entire game. Um, as also like side note, we didn't mention it before, but I don't really like the intro to the show. I don't know, I think it's one of those like
It's
overproduced
fine.
HBO
Yeah, it's
show.
fine. I'm not a fan as well, but the music helps.
The music does help. It's like I can endure it.
Let me just put it back because I haven't talked about this, and you didn't already given my take on this, but I think it's important because I do think that the vignettes of the first two episodes, both John Hannes and the Indonesia Jakarta
Mm,
opening, are absolutely terrifying, and they help a lot in what is like once again the world building. And I mean, it takes 5 6 minutes, so I don't think it hurts that much the piece
no.
of it. I was actually even disappointed when I understood that they would keep doing that. I found it weird that they only did it the first two. It's like very weird choice. Like 2 episodes with this and no more. Okay,
Yeah,
sure, but I would like a bit more of that.
they could have had more cold opens like that. I don't know. I don't even know, like, even for the final episode with. Oh no, maybe they do it. I don't remember actually. Now I'm blanking on it. Yeah, the final episode has the cold open with Ellie's mom, and then it goes to credits, and then it starts
Yeah,
again with Marlene.
yeah,
That's right.
pretty sure. Yeah, pretty sure.
Okay, yeah, that's like the last time they do it, sadly. But yeah, is there anything more you want to add to the Last of Us show game conversation that we haven't really touched on? Or
No, I think this conversation will be much interesting when the second season comes out
oh, we'll be
because
back. We'll be
it's one
back
of
for
the
sure.
bravest games I've ever seen. Like the narrative they did is like, oh my god, you're really going for it. This might backfire quite a bit, and it did, because fans are absolute piece of shit and they do not understand greatness.
It's
Last of Us
funny.
Part Two, it's a masterpiece. I would say it even easier than the first one. I think the Part Two is a masterpiece.
I'm excited to finally play it. I know it's coming out on PC. I think similarly to what they did with the first season. I think the PC port for The Last of Us 2 comes out around the release date of the second season. Um, I'm excited to play it for myself. I'm excited for the show as well. It's gonna be funny to see. Speaking of cycles of violence, just like people fucking hated the second game and the actors playing certain characters
I'm
because of the actions
very
they
interested
play.
to see what oh my god, I'm blanking the name.
Caitlin Deaver.
Kathleen Deaver will go through. I am very interested to see, and the poor girl.
I don't. I mean, it's one of those things. Like I don't know if they do it on purpose at this point, because considering what Bella Ramsey went through with the casting as Elle, it's like also you see Caitlin Deaver and you see the character she's supposed to play, and it's like you're just asking for that backlash in a way, which is happening. Which is happening. I don't think I've ever seen a place more toxic than the Last of Us subreddit. For some reason, it keeps getting pushed to me. I don't follow it. I don't want to see that shit. It's just people constantly complaining that they don't look like the actors from the game, which is like you. I mean, again, it's fake characters, not real people, the ones in the game. I don't know how they're supposed to look like that, but also, yeah, weird choices, weird choices. But we shall see in a few months' time. We'll probably be back to talk about season 2 of The Last of Us once it's over. Um, Before we leave, of course, Rafael, speaking of the game, do you have a favorite scene then? If you had to pick a specific moment, maybe an interaction, a moment of gameplay that you would say is your favorite,
About gameplay.
or just a
Uh,
cutscene could even be,
yeah, I like the whole Bill bit, like the going through town, fighting like a ghost town full of booby traps. There's a main road on that where you can enter all buildings and
Mm,
find all sort of stuff. It makes the world feel very poppin'. I also like very much the Henry and Sam final moments. I think it's a very strong thing.
yeah.
And game wise, the hospital scene is fucking awesome. It's just courage. And you have all the weapons, and you have all the upgrades, the flamethrowers, the whole thing. It's still very hard, even with all the weapons. But I
It's
love it.
rough.
It's very brutal.
It's rough. It's a rough sequence. I don't have to say, like, for me it's probably for me I think the entire lead up to the "You're Not My Daughter" scene, just the horseback ride
Yeah,
and
going to the house and all
going to
that.
the
Yeah,
house and exploring it and trying to find Ellie. I think that moment is just like a little moment of peace and beauty in this horrible, horrible world that I really appreciated. But even just exploring the suburbs with Henry and Sam, I think the entire sequence in the sewers I can do without. I think that's padding. Just like you already spent a sequence with them in the city, then you have to be on the beach and the sewers, then you do the suburbs. I'm just like, just go straight to the suburbs. That's something that nice that they do with the show. It's actually a bit more more straightforward in terms of locations. But that moment as well, because it leads. I think everything that leads to opportunities in expanding the characters in the game, in the context of the game, just works so well. Um, and it leads to some fun musings as well on the world we live in, or in the game's context that we used to live in, which is amusing to say the least. Also because it's supposed to be 2003 in the when the apocalypse started in the game. No, in the show it's
in the
2003. In
show
the
in
game it's like
2003, I don't think it's clear on the game.
it's probably like 90s, maybe like late 90s or
There are
something.
cell phones, so I don't know, but it's like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, yeah. So like early technology, kind of. Um, well, speaking for the show, I think if go first for this, I think it's kind of a tie as well for me between the Annie and David sequence in jail. When she's trapped, when she breaks his fucking finger. Just a nice moment of brutality in that sense, but also the conversation that they have. It kind of leads into what we were talking about. Kind of like the build up to the second season, the moment where he's like, "I see the violence in you. You have a violent heart. I have it myself." They do lean very heavily into Ellie being kind of a psychopath in the first kind of episodes, and then they almost abandon it until this ending, in a way. But throughout, she does always recover, or seemingly recovers very quickly from violence, death, traumas like that. Um, but also the interaction that they have in the final episode, um, where Joel reveals that he almost shot himself and missed, you know, and he says, "I guess time heals all wounds." She says,
It's
and
not
he replies,
time.
"It wasn't time that did it."
Yeah,
And that's like,
it's very
and that's
good.
what, and again, that's when it feels it's not so much just the writing, but it actually feels like the actors themselves have connected more as they were shooting the show. Not in a way that's very organic at first, but I think they get there. They get there at the end. Do you have a favorite moment or two from the show that are emblematic for you?
The Henry and Sam final moments are
Mm.
amazing.
Like that, trying the transfusion as well.
Yeah, it's very cutesy. It's very sad as well. Really, really like that scene. I love the conversation between David and Ellie, but on the cot. like
Ah,
where he slowly tells her, "Yeah, there was a guy who killed someone in the university. Isn't fate amazing?" or something like that. It's very creepy, and I like it a lot. Uh, yeah, I mean those those moments are amazing. This and the Bill and Frank episode, all of it, it's heartbreaking. I know you're not a super fan of it, but I think it works amazingly, and I love that episode. The whole thing.
just just to clarify, I do love the episode. It makes me cry every time I watch it. I love the Linda Ronstadt song. I think those moments are delightful. Um, there's just something about it that I don't know. Like I don't know. I don't think we need it. I don't know if it even makes sense saying like we don't need it. It's just I don't know. I think it. I think
We
it's
don't
just.
need anything, Nick. We never
It's.
need anything.
I know. It's just such a good standalone episode that it takes away from. It almost makes the other episodes feel lesser in a way. I feel
It's a
similar. Like
little treat they're giving us.
it's a very good treat. I had the same issue with. I think it was the first season of Westworld, where the show itself is like fine, but then there's one episode that focuses on just one character, one standalone character, and it's amazing. And then everything that comes after, I'm like, I don't care. I actually wish you did more of that. I wish you had more vignettes. And in a way, I almost do wish, kind of like in a different reality, we had a The Last of Us show that was each episode just follows different character, and I think that could be amazing. Which I feel like it's something they're gonna do. Speaking of like adaptations, I think with the upcoming Death Stranding A24 film, it's something they're gonna try to do. Um, but it's something that worked really well with the Fallout show, I think. Which at this point I would probably consider my favorite video game adaptation. There's something special about it. I don't know if you've seen it actually, the Fallout show.
I've seen the first episode. I really liked it, but I didn't stuck with it. But I will finish it at some
It's
point.
worth it. It is worth it. It's very well made,
I'm a
and it
Bethesda guy as well, so yeah.
yeah, we love our RPGs. We love our RPGs. So last question before we close this episode,
And before I stop breathing,
and before you stop breathing,
it's getting gnarly at this point.
you have endured and survived
Yeah,
for 90
I
minutes
I am in the
almost.
bushes as of now. Yeah.
Which one do you prefer? The
The
video
game.
game Last of
It's
Us
the
or
game.
the show?
It is still the game. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It will always be the game. That's the thing. It will always be the game. Also because the connection is different, it's much older. It's something that changed the way I look at video games, and it's something that is deeply attached as well to part two. So I can't
Mm-hmm.
detach it from part two. So yeah, it for now it is absolutely the game, but I still love the TV show.
Some nice high quality nostalgia right there. Um, I'll definitely go with the game as well. I would have said if we had this conversation back in 2023, it might have actually been the other way around. But I think revisiting the game was definitely needed for me to better appreciate it now that it plays properly on PC. And it's just a very touching story. And the way they managed to tell such a story through the medium of video games, I don't think fully translates to film, which is why they were forced to have a lot of changes applied there. They needed to expand a lot of parts. Again, I don't think it's always necessary. I think they could have kept some mysteries, especially about, like Helly's mother, how the pandemic started. But then again, their goal is not to make. I mean, they want to sell. They want people to watch this. They want people to like it. And while I'm not the biggest fan of some of those changes, as we've discussed, I can say it worked for many others. I will never forget, like watching the first episode, nearly gave a panic attack to my parents watching it because it hit very close to home. Thinking of the pandemic, and then Jonah Hanna just like scaring the bejesus out of everyone. It is an effective way of setting everything up, but yeah, I'm excited to see where they go with this. I am a bit scared. I think, considering the way the game is structured, it's not something they can ever properly do. And we can talk more of Mike maybe about this. We're going into spoilers. I don't think they can pull it off as well with a TV show, but I'm also going to be happy to be proven wrong. I want to be back here, let's say August, September, talking about The Last of Us Season 2, and gonna be like, you know what? They fucking did it. They nailed it. I don't know where they're gonna go. It's like, I was wrong. I was wrong. We shall see.
I sure hope so.
Fingers crossed. But yes, thank you so much, Rafael, for for managing to get to the end of this episode, to the end of this conversation.
It was a lovely conversation. It was probably the longest hour and a half I had in my life.
Just struggling with every
I'm
breath.
struggling to every breath. Exactly. It's not easy, but
Bless
it's what
you.
I do for a Zionist, like
You
Neil
are.
Druckmann.
I am not like. We're gonna have to touch probably on that all side of things when it comes to the second game, because he definitely had some opinions about Israel and Palestine when the game dropped in 2020, and he certainly has had opinions since then. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
he
But
is a piece of shit.
but thank you again for this, Rafael. Where can our listeners find your writing, your work on the interwebs if they want to catch up with you?
Probably tomorrow in the hospital, most likely. I'm on
Send
Letterboxd.
flowers.
Pretty much. I'm on Letterboxd and RJR Felix. I have a website with a couple of friends who write in Portuguese, but as Nico does, you can also use Google Translate. It's called fiocondutor.com.
Translates beautifully. I can
Yeah,
attest to that.
I think it works quite. I think it works better for some reviews than others. Because sometimes I do flourish my writing a little too much, and it hurts the translator too much. But yeah, and in a couple of weeks, we'll find me in Berlin with
Yee.
this Italian princess going through the cinemas of Berlinale.
Reunited again after shooting a short film together in August, coming back to Berlin once
Yeah,
more in
and
February.
going through Berlin, getting blood, getting
Good memories.
smokes, yeah, fucking up walls. A magical week.
A magical week indeed. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Blue Sky, on Instagram, and on Letterboxd, NikiGra97 or Nicolo Grasso. You're gonna find me rather easily. You can watch my short films and videos on YouTube and Vimeo at Enjoy the Movies. If you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, do follow us, leave a thumbs up, 5 stars, share with people. All those good things always help out. And you can also follow the podcast on Instagram at Anatomy of Adaptation Pod to stay up to date with all new releases. Thank you so much for listening to this. We hope you have a lovely, lovely day. Goodbye.